Sometimes when you rewatch a movie or a TV show that you liked as a kid, you think to yourself, was I really that dumb? Whether because of our undeveloped brains or because our priorities when consuming media as children are just different than they are when we're adults, rewatching the things that you enjoyed as a kid when you're an adult doesn't always stand up to scrutiny. However, sometimes a piece of children's media is so transcendent, so powerful, so flawless in its execution that it ages like a fine wine, becoming better and better each time you consume it, no matter what age you are. Barbie as the Princess and the Pauper is one of these movies, and I can prove it. Salutations! I'm Becca, this is Words and Other Malarkey, and I've been gone a while, if you didn't notice. And if you also didn't notice, our location has changed. New me, new location, new direction for the channel. I'm doing video essays now. I'm a video essay person. I've been really wanting to deep dive into some of my favorite movies and TV shows and things that are just not books. I started realizing that, I don't know, something wasn't clicking for me in the way that I was organizing this channel, and I'm gonna try something new. Basically, I'm just gonna throw a bunch of stuff at a wall and see if it sticks, and this is my first go, so please bear with me here, but I'm super duper excited to take a deep dive into one of my favorite movies from when I was young, Barbie as a Princess and the Pauper, a 2004 CGI animated film that, is an adaptation of none other than The Prince and the Pauper. That's where we're gonna start, actually, because I have this split in parts, okay? I have it organized, I have a structure, and we're gonna dive right in, and we're gonna break this thing down from the very beginning, and I'm gonna prove to you why Barbie as the Princess and the Pauper slaps way harder than any Barbie movie has any right to. Part 1, the adaptation. I'm not talking about the story yet, we'll get to that. I'm talking about how they chose to adapt this fairy tale into a movie. And hold on, let me shatter your reality for a minute. Prince and the Pauper is not a fairy tale. It's actually a Mark Twain novel from 1881. This blew my mind when I learned it. I had no idea, but it's so ingrained in our cultural psyche like a fairy tale that you just kind of consider it one. It just doesn't come from the same oral storytelling tradition, I don't think. And remarkably, our Disney overlords haven't adapted this one into a full-length feature film. They almost did with Kingdom of the Sun, but that never happened. They did a short film, like a 25-minute special with Mickey Mouse playing the Prince and the Pauper, and that's what most people think of when they think of cartoon adaptations of this fairy tale, but that doesn't really count. That left the void of a feature-length film unfulfilled. Enter Mattel in the 90s. Mattel had a problem. At the time, Bratz dolls had entered the market, and they were dominating the market because apparently girls wanted dolls with poofy lips and bad attitudes. And then they had another problem, the internet. All hail our Apple overlords, because now little girls were spending more time on the computer than they were playing with dolls. Mattel had to adapt because they weren't selling Barbie dolls like they once did. And what did they decide to do? They decided to invest in entertainment media, interactive media that they could then link to their products. So when you think about what Mattel actually did with their Barbie movies, you can critique them by saying they made movies to sell dolls, right? They are a merchandise company that made movies to sell merchandise, but when you really think about it, they're actually just a inverse of Disney, a movie company that makes merchandise to sell merchandise. So really their aims were the same, but their resources were different. I will make one disclaimer about this movie that is in the negative, because of course you can criticize the heck out of Barbie Princess and the Pauper. It's a child's movie made by a doll company. The one thing that it does not have is great animation. Is it the worst you'll ever see? No. But is it Disney quality? Absolutely not. The animation is subpar, and we're just gonna have to accept that. But what they did have were apparently some smart people working in their research and development department, because instead of going for all of the fairy tales that you know and love, and probably a big reason why they did this is because Disney had such a vice grip on the market, and they probably had copyrighted a lot of stories already, so they couldn't go and adapt Snow White and Sleeping Beauty. They would get in trouble. They had to think outside the box, but there was still a lot of uncharted territory when it came to fairy tales adapted into movies. They could have chose anything to start with. What did they choose in 2001? The Nutcracker, of all things. Why did they choose the Nutcracker? I have not done the research. I would love to do a video on the Nutcracker one day. It's another favorite of mine, but it has a few more flaws than Barbie Princess and the Pauper does. However, it did start an interesting tradition, pattern, I don't know what to call it, in the Mattel Barbie movie universe, and that is that they chose to prioritize the arts, particularly classical and ballet music. The Nutcracker is a ballet. They use the music from the ballet and the choreography from the ballet in their movie. And then the next movie to come out, I believe, was Swan Lake, another ballet, another Tchaikovsky ballet, and all of the music in that movie is from the ballet. Next we have Rapunzel. Rapunzel's the first fairy tale, honest to God fairy tale they decided to adapt, but they didn't use an original score. If you notice, if you're a nerd like me and you pay attention to these things, they actually use excerpts from Dvorak's New World Symphony as their orchestral score, a very famous symphony that is actually very thematically relevant because Rapunzel with the paintbrush and the, entering a new world. Anyways, it's great, it's awesome, but basically the point is they started this tradition of prioritizing the arts in their movies, and it was actually genius and brilliant. It was different and quasi-educational. I cannot describe to you the ecstasy of being a teenager and hearing Mendelssohn's Italian Symphony live for the first time, and me and my sister looking at each other, and then at intermission saying to each other, "That's the song from 12 Dancing Princesses!" I'm not even kidding. Barbie legitimately helped me develop my love of classical music that I carry to this day. And it's all because they chose to use good music in their movies. If they weren't going to invest in a composer to come up with original scores for their movies, they were going to use good music to score their movies instead, or adapt ballet, something that wasn't being done, that already had good music in it. Enter Princess and the Pauper in 2004, Barbie's first honest to God original musical with all original songs in the true fashion of a Disney Princess Renaissance film. And it is really impressively good. We're gonna look at it. We're gonna break it down. This was the first time that they were departing from their tradition of using pre-existing music. They had Arnie Roth compose, and they had the London Symphony Orchestra play the score. I don't know how they did it. I don't know how they did it, but it was a great idea. It's good music. It's good music, and it shows that somebody cared when they were writing the script and scoring and writing the lyrics to the songs of this movie. Now let's pause, because I have a whole section later about the music itself, and it was really difficult to separate the plot section from the music section, because in the fashion of a true musical, okay, I've been watching a lot of Sideways. His videos are great. Go check out his channel. He does musical analyses of movies and stuff, and he talks about how a true musical, and he's quoting Howard Ashman, who scored The Little Mermaid and Beauty and the Beast, that if a musical's done right, then the songs are inseparable from the plot. And believe it or not, the songs in Barbie, Princess and the Pauper are inseparable from the plot. They are integral, and they do everything that music in a musical should do. And not only do they do it well, with competent singers, competent songwriters, and competent orchestras performing the music. Okay, put a pin in that one. Let's talk about the plot of Barbie and Princess and the Pauper. So, we open on a kingdom on a mountainside, and you learn through a quick narration, which, by the way, is a departure from the usual Barbie formula of having it be a frame tale where the Barbie is usually telling a moral lesson to Kelly that has to do with something that they're immediately dealing with in their universe. And she tells this fairy tale to convey the message to Kelly, a very roundabout way of doing so, and sometimes kind of abstract. But this is the first time we get an actual just voiceover narration. Barbie telling us we're in this kingdom on a mountainside, and these two girls are born on the same day. This is actually true to the source material. And one is born to the king and queen, and the other is born to paupers. So, completely different, situations in life. And they grow up. One becomes an indentured servant, and the other gets groomed for her royal duties. But oh no, wait, the kingdom is in trouble. The kingdom is bankrupt. What is the queen gonna do? Oh wait, she remembers. There is a rich young king who is seeking a wife, and she just happens to have a daughter who is unmarried. Bingo bango, let's marry her off. And the story can begin. And we open with the first song in the movie. Again, I gotta put pins in all these songs because I want to talk about them and I can't. But basically, it's an I Want song. And you learn very important things about each of the characters. It's a duet. You have Erica the Pauper, Annalise the Princess singing, and they tell you what their lives are like and what they want. Erica's in a tough place. She's an indentured servant. Her parents went into debt in order to take care of her. And now her parents have, by inference, died, and she has inherited the debt. And she works for a dress shop for this terrible woman named Madame Carp, who is just awful. She's really awful. Like, her lines seriously are like, "You'll be working for me for another 37 years, and it's a shame that your parents went into debt to feed you." This movie pulls no punches with its villains. Annalise has no personal freedom. Her day is dictated by royal duties and now on top of it all, she's engaged to a man that she doesn't know and doesn't love. And you learn in this song that she is in love with her tutor, Julian. Julian will become very important later on. Julian, great, we stand Julian, he's great. So now we have established character motivations. However, both of these characters conclude in the song by saying, even though I wish my life was different, I'm going to do what is expected of me because it's the right thing to do. There's literally a line that says, "I would take flight, but would it be right? My conscience tells me stay." And they both resolve to stay in their current positions instead of doing something brash or impulsive and trying to get out of their current situation. This is important because it says a lot about these characters right up front, because things are going to go haywire and they're not going to be stuck in their current positions, or else we wouldn't have a movie. Next scene, very next scene, we get introduced to our villain. We're taken down deep into a mine and we see two henchmen and they're mining gold, the last of the gold. You also see that this random rock has gotten put in the mining cart and it gets thrown away because the one henchman is like, "This isn't gold, blah, 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 blah." And you see it roll and break against the ground and you see that there's amethyst inside. Hold on to that because that is actually very important foreshadowing, and the amethyst will become very, very important later. It's actually very clever, and I'm getting ahead of myself, but it's a clever piece of foreshadowing for a freaking Barbie movie. Okay, and then you get introduced to your villain, Preminger, the Queen's royal advisor, and he's been away on a long journey. Well, that long journey was to literally steal all of the gold from the Queen's mines, as if somebody wouldn't notice. Are there no workers? Are there no overseers, regulations? No? Okay, whatever. He's stolen all the gold. Also, it begs the question. The reason that the kingdom has gone bankrupt is because there's no more gold in the mines. And okay, Barbie, it's a Barbie movie. We don't need to be concerned about the minutia of economics, but actually if you really think about it, it kind of makes sense, because first they say the kingdom's on a mountainside, and so you can infer that they probably found this gold mine first and then built the kingdom around it, and then their prosperity came directly from the gold mine, and they probably established a gold standard from which their currency came, and now that there's no gold standard. So basically the value of their currency has plummeted to zero. No gold standard, no currency, no value. Everybody's poor, everybody's sad. It actually kind of makes sense in a weird roundabout way, but kids don't care about that. What they care about is that our villain sings, and it is the villain song slaps. Again, pin, we'll talk about his villain song in a little bit, but what you learn is that he has been plotting to steal all this gold and to present it to the Queen and say, "Look at all this gold I found, can I marry your daughter?" And he's really old too, so it's kind of like a Jafar situation, like, ew, gross. But okay, so Preminger is a great villain in a lot of ways, and I can't spend like a ton of time breaking down his character, but basically what you learn is that he's incredibly narcissistic, egotistic, and he's basically got a hero complex. Basically all of his plans revolve around committing a crime in secret and then pretending to be the person that reveals the crime and saves the day. That is literally a definition of the hero complex as I know it from Criminal Minds. Don't quote me on that, but yeah, he's an interesting dude. Just so you know, Martin Short is the person that voices him. Mattel set up a very interesting and awesome tradition in their 2000s Barbie movies of hiring an A-list actor to play the villains. You had Tim Curry for Nutcracker, you had Angelica Houston for Rapunzel, you had, I think, Kelsey Grammer for Swan Lake, and now you have Martin Short for Preminger, and he overacts the hell out of it, and he makes the role. Like, it's just so ridiculous and over the top. It makes you laugh, but at the same time, he's very cunning and clever, and you're kind of surprised. At the same time, he's a total idiot. Like, it works. It just works, and it's because Martin Short poured his heart out into this performance. Did he have to give a crap? No, he did not, but he did, and we're very grateful for it. So next we go back to Annalise, and Annalise is sad because she's engaged to a rich, handsome king that she doesn't love. You know, it doesn't matter. She doesn't know the guy. She has no idea if he's nice. All she knows is that he's rich, and that's not enough for her. She doesn't just, you know, she doesn't just judge people on their material value. So Julian, soft boy that he is, decides to cheer her up, and by cheering her up, he takes her to the village. and they remark on the getting fresh air, and I just think that's really funny. So you can tell by the costume design and like some of the references they make that they've basically like based this kingdom on like 18th century France. If you know anything about 18th century cities, you know that they had anything but fresh air. If by fresh air you mean dank, poopy air, you're probably on the right track, because I know from reading something that you could smell Philadelphia and Paris from like 2 miles away. And obviously this place is kind of like Paris, sort of. But hey, you know, Annalise is just happy to be outside the palace. She's happy to have a taste of freedom. You know, whatever that means to her. So we'll forgive her for apparently going nose blind in this moment. So Julian goes to get her some drinks because he's the best. Can we just appreciate their chemistry? Like, honestly, this Barbie movie probably has the best chemistry between the couples. They actually spend time establishing like real relationships between the main couples, and in the case of Julian and Annalise, you already know that they're really close friends, and he's her tutor. So like they have this like established connection to each other. They obviously care for each other, and they are so thirsty for each other, it's not even funny. What we also get is a little nice tidbit into Julian's backstory. They didn't have to do this. Barbie movie didn't have to do this, but it did, where Annalise asks, "Can you show me the house where you grew up?" And he remarks, "It was more of a room, really." And he proceeds to point to the apartment building where he and his family lived before he came to work at the palace. Now, again, I can put another pin in this because I'm going to go back to Julian, and it's going to connect to a lot of things. This is a very tangled web we're weaving, apparently, with this 90-minute long feature film with Barbie as the protagonist. However, it is kind of nice to know. You learn that Julian was a pauper, and now he is the royal tutor, I guess. How that happened, we don't know, but we stand. I'm sorry I'm using the word stand. I'm trying to be hip in with the cool kids, you know, and I don't know any other word to like express this feeling right now. We also see Annalise look on in confusion and sadness as a family boards up their house and leaves the village. So she's getting this taste, you know, she thought she was getting this kind of like escape from her day to day, but she starts to realize, wait a second, the people in my kingdom are actually suffering. Like, there's a real problem here. This is the first time that Annalise's like worldview is shattered a little bit, because she's been kind of sheltered behind the comfy walls of the palace where she's had her books and her cat and whatnot. And then what's this? She hears someone singing. And who else could it be? It's our homegirl Erica doing a little bit of busking in the square. Is it called busking if you don't have an instrument? Your voice is your instrument. She's busking, she's collecting some money. Her cat, Wolfie, who barks like a dog, that's important also for later. He's next to the coin jar, and he's collecting, he's having a good time. But then Madame Carp appears and is like, "This is my money, bitch." And then Annalise comes by and gives money to the poor, and it's like, that's a lovely song. And then they look at each other and are like, holy shit, we look exactly the same. And then they're introduced to each other, and you know, Annalise reveals not so subtly that she's the princess. And what's funny in this moment is that Erica like bows and says, "Your Highness," and Annalise doesn't even correct her. She's like, "Oh, no need to do that." She just lets it happen. And this is actually a unintentionally good insight into Annalise's character that we'll get to later. I don't know how many we'll get to later I have stacked up on each other right now, but I'm gonna be paying for it in the end, let me tell you. So they talk, and then they sing. And Erica tells Annalise about her life. She's very open about it. She's like, "This is my life, it sucks." And then she reciprocates the question like a polite person would, and Annalise is hesitant to respond because she knows that her answer is gonna sound totally pretentious, and it does. Erica's like, "I have to wake up early to get my eggs, it sucks, and Madame Carp makes me pay for it, and Annalise is like, "I gotta ring a bell, and oh my gosh, I have to suffer being pampered. But really what I want to do more than anything else is I want to be in my library reading science books, bitch." Yes, she's a nerd. She's a major freaking science nerd. Hashtag women in STEM. Let's go. Science princess. And they're not super like overt with it. I actually really appreciate it. It's a subtle detail. She is really intellectual and she loves science. So in a brilliant jump of logical correlation, Erica exclaims, "I'm just like you." And Annalise's knee-jerk reaction is to say, you are, because she can't conceive of the idea that because the two of them just shared aspects of their lives that are quote-unquote difficult, they could possibly be the same. But then Erica sings about it, and she explains, there's somewhere else we'd rather be. And then later, as the song continues, Annalise starts to get it. Okay, wait a second. We both have things that we want to do that aren't the things we currently are doing. That makes us the same. And maybe also the fact that they look the same. But it's a cool detail, I guess, or like enhancement to the story that not only do they look alike, but they have these like parallel problems, so to speak. And we're going to talk about the like dissonance between, okay, let's talk about it now. I'm tired of pinning things. Let's talk about it now. It's difficult to write a princess versus pauper story because inevitably you're going to run into this problem. The princess's problems are so incredibly trivial compared to the paupers. Erica is literally an indentured servant. She's basically a slave. She's a slave to compound interest at the very least. And Annalise just has to marry a rich, hot king that she doesn't love. She's going to be completely taken care of for the rest of her life. But she does have to take care of her kingdom. And that's something that you don't realize because we're very critical of monarchies and royal families because of all the like extravagance and luxury and wealth that they have. And just, how much they take advantage of it. They have the power, they have the status. But what this movie kind of points out, like either by accident or, through some actual competent writing, is that royal life was in and of itself, especially during this time period, its own kind of prison. At least the writers try really hard to establish that Annalise does recognize that she's privileged, but she has absolutely no freedom, nor did she ask to be a royal. And that's the other thing about monarchies. They didn't ask to be rulers. They were born into it. They are as much a product of the system as the paupers are. The difference is that they have all their needs met in terms of not being hungry or lack of clothing or shelter. Those were important things, and those are things you shouldn't take for granted. But people are more nuanced than that. I would love to take the time to go through Maslow's hierarchy of needs with you right now, but I've got a movie to deep dive analyze, so we're going to save that crap for later. Besides, we're going to come back to this in the themes section anyway. But it's just something I wanted to point out. It's kind of comical and like almost unintentional social commentary that you have this juxtaposition between Erica's plight and Annalise's plight. The scene doesn't end with a let's trade places. It ends with, you should come sing at the palace sometime. It's just not even a promise. It's like a maybe. Like, maybe we'll see each other again. Maybe you'll sing at the palace. Actually, no, she doesn't say you must sing at the palace sometimes. But she doesn't say, come next Wednesday. She says, I'll send someone for you. It's almost the equivalent of like, oh yeah, I'll call you back later. Like, it might not actually happen. But it gives Erica hope, and it rocks her world. She might just have a chance to get out of this hellhole that she calls life. All because she just happened to look like the princess and befriend her via song. So next we have, what do we have next? Oh, right, the kidnapping scene. Bum, bum, bum. Oh, I missed something. I didn't tell you something important. This is really interesting because there's a lot of details in this movie that if you leave them out, other things don't make sense. So in the villain song, Preminger is just gonna come home with the money and be like, hey, I'm here, marry me, I got the gold. But his henchmen inform him that the princess has already been promised to a rich young king. And Preminger is like, excuse me? He's actually like low-key salty about it. Like he can't fathom that Annalise would like want another man. Like this guy has so much ego that he can't even like, okay, anyways, it doesn't matter. But he revises his plan. He's gonna improvise, adapt, and overcome. And he does. He decides instead of just coming home with the money, he is going to kidnap the princess and then wait until the king yeets out of there. I can't believe I used the word yeet. Because why would he stick around for a bride that ran away and wouldn't marry him, or that just generally isn't there? And then Preminger's gonna bring her back and say, look, I found her! And then the queen will betroth him to her and he'll get what he wants. It's very clever. It's very problematic. Let's go. The princess gets kidnapped. That's pretty much all you need to know. via her cat, like, getting kind of abused. Poor cat. Cat characters are legitimately not annoying in this movie. They're genuinely likable. They do talk, but they only talk to each other. You know, they have that, like, animated movie animal intelligence where, like, they can understand humans talking, but, like, you know, obviously they don't talk to the humans. So it's good, it's cool. And the cats are actually very important to the plot. They actually do things, and they actually help their humans. They're both fiercely loyal to their respective women, girls, owners, whatever. So that's all you need to know about the cats. Cat gets kidnapped. Princess gets kidnapped. Oh no! The next morning, oh no, the princess is missing. The ambassador to the king and a page boy that definitely isn't King Dominic in disguise show up with the intention of, you know, like meeting the princess and establishing good relations before the wedding, etc. But oh no, she's gone! That's not good. So the plan is going very nicely. And Preminger notices that there's a letter on her desk, an I'm running away letter. And Julian takes it and he sniffs it and says, it smells like the wrong flower. Okay, it's not literally what he says. He's like, it smells like lilac. She doesn't use lilac to scent her stationery. She uses rose. So he thinks this whole thing is very sus. Preminger is very sus. And also, I just would like to point out just how cute but like questionable it is that Julian paid enough attention to like know what her stationery smelled like. This implies one of two things subtextually. Either she wrote him letters, or he actively sniffed her mail. Now, maybe it was so fragrant he couldn't help but, you know, take a whiff. Or maybe that boy was just like, Annalise. We stan Julian, okay? Stan Julian. So, what does Julian do? The only logical thing he can think of. He tracks down the doppelganger that he just met and asks her to take the princess's place while he goes and looks for her. And Erica's a little hesitant at first. She kind of thought she was being called on to like sing at the palace, like Emily's promise, but no, I guess she's being called on to be an imposter for this like giant conspiracy with the princess being kidnapped. But she decides to do it because she remembers that even though she only met Annalise once, she doesn't really know her, she is a girl like her. They share this bond of connection, of empathetic, you know, empathy. It's empathy. Maybe she also thinks, hey, maybe this is the springboard I need to get me out of the hellhole that I call life. Who knows? But she agrees to go with Julian. So then we get the hallmark musical number of the Barbie cinematic universe, To Be a Princess. This song is so iconic that Mattel ripped off their own movie in another one of their movies so they could reuse and remarket this song. I haven't actually seen Princess and the Pop Star, and honestly, I never plan to because it's an insult to the memory of Princess and the Pauper. At least that's what I've heard from people that have watched it and critiqued it on YouTube. To Be a Princess is another interesting, it's a fun song, it's super catchy, total earworm, and kind of establishes this fun dynamic between Julian and Erica, but it also establishes something different. Just how freaking difficult a princess's life is, how many do's and don'ts there are, how like every minute of their day is dictated and how they can never be themselves. It literally says you can never show what you feel, you always have to look your best, you always have to be polite, you always have to do this, you have to say the right thing, do the right thing. It's enough to drive anybody crazy. That takes a psychological toll on a person. That's why royal families were generally so messed up, I think, maybe, I don't know. But in this case, it does give you an interesting insight into the prison that is obligatory royal life. Oh, and then we get this great little, like, I don't know if this was like a blooper and they decided to leave it in or they did this intentionally. Either way, it's freaking brilliant, where Julia gets carried away singing about how beautiful Annalise is, and he gets to like the top of the phrase and his voice cracks, and he literally, his voice cracks and he clears his throat and continues singing. This boy is so thirsty he cannot help but just like break into song about Annalise's beauty. It's a great moment. It's just very subtle and fun, and I hope it was done intentionally because it was definitely like appreciated. Okay, so we have our imposter in place. We have the ambassador. This time is ticking. Let's go. Where's the bride? They're about to leave, but then Julian and Erica come in. Wait, we found the princess. And she's a little clumsy and she speaks a little stilted, but it's definitely the princess, or so everybody thinks. So Preminger's super duper confused. Like, when did she escape? But conveniently, meanwhile, the princess is being kept at a secondary location, a sort of cabin in the woods that I really don't want to know the origins of, and she's being watched over by the two idiot comic relief henchmen that are actually really funny, even though they're complete and and utter buffoons. That's what they're there for, they're henchmen. And her loyal cat Serafina finds a way into the room and helps her escape because the two of them are idiots. So the following evening, I suppose, I'm not really keeping track of the chronology of this particular part of the story, Preminger comes to check on the princess. And lo and behold, she has escaped on those two idiots' watch. And we're treated to a very comical scene where like he enters and the henchmen try to play it off like everything's fine, and then he goes into the room and the blonde henchman is pretending to be the princess, and it's so funny and like borderline risque. It honestly makes me laugh every time. Okay, so, oh no, the princess has escaped. What does she do? The first thing she does, of course, logically, is go back to the palace. But she's not permitted to go inside because the guard says, I just saw the princess eating dinner. Go away. You're not the princess.
Identity theft is not a joke, Jim. Millions of families suffer every year.
She's super confused. Annalise is totally in the dark. In fact, she's in the dark about this whole thing for a majority of the movie. And she's smart enough to like hold her own and kind of, probably connect some dots, but you never actually see the thing explained to her until the end, maybe. So she doesn't know what else to do. She's stuck. She turns away and she goes to the village, and Madame Carp finds her and mistakes her for Erica, and she gets thrown into Erica's life accidentally. And here you see that even though Annalise is a princess, she's a moral person, she's a good-hearted person, and she stands up for like the other dress shop worker because Madame Carp mistreats her and literally calls her a lazy cow. And she says, how dare you speak to your workers that way? So, she's a good-hearted person. She just only knows what she knows. She wouldn't act outside of her station because that's not what she's been taught. She doesn't know anything different than how to be a princess. She's literally been taught to be a princess. She's probably had that song drilled into her since she was a child. So we can infer subtextually. But having been thrown into a situation where her status and her title do not matter, she is reliant completely on her wits and on her conscience. And thankfully, she has both. So what does she do? She makes the best of a bad situation. She works at the dress shop. I mean, she also gets locked in because, indentured servitude is like a glorified prison. But she befriends the other dress shop worker, whose name we never know, and she tries to make a dress, which is kind of cute, and she kind of fails. And she's like, wow, this is really kind of hard. And you just kind of see her, whether by accident or by some miracle of competent writing, realizing that her problems were maybe not as much as problems as she thought they were problems. The next morning, we have Erica waking up in the princess's bed, and even though this is like a big conspiracy and she has to pretend to be the princess, homegirl's gonna enjoy herself. She is having a freaking blast. She gets served breakfast in bed, and she even starts the scene trying to be all regal, and then as soon as she sees the food, she just completely breaks down. Just like, oh my god, she gives some to the maid, and the maid is just like, what the fuck is going on? Because of course Annalise wouldn't give her maid food. That's not what princesses do, okay? She's a good person, but she doesn't know anything outside of her social class, okay? We've established this. And like, at first, your first gut reaction is think, you dumb bitch, like you're trying to pretend to be the princess. This is the opposite of what a princess would do and act. This is the first time Erica has experienced luxury or extravagance or anything that isn't, a sad, poverty-stricken existence. So she is overwhelmed by the stimulus. She can't help but act this way, She's never, ever had this experience before. And then she gets to take a bath, an actual, bath, in probably warm water and not, cold, dirty water. So she's just, she is soaking up. She is living her best life. Sorry I keep using all of these Gen Z idioms. I'm sorry, I can't help it. And then we have this great scene where King Dominic decides that now is the time that he needs to tell the princess that he disguised himself as a page boy in order to meet her incognito for the first time. So he goes to her chambers. Are there no maids? Are there no guards? No ladies in waiting? Apparently not. He goes up to the door and knocks, and at this point, Erica has broken into song because Wolfie, her cat, has tried to meow. He is so, overwhelmed by this proper palace life and by the cute girl cat he met earlier that acts like an actual cat, that he's trying to be an actual cat. And so she sings this song called The Cat's Meow about how he should just be himself and she loves everything about him. It's actually a super sweet song about loving yourself for who you are, and we'll talk about it later. Okay, so Dominic just kind of creeps in on this song, but he doesn't look at her, because if he looked at her, he'd see that her hair was the wrong color, and that would sort of ruin the whole her being in disguise thing. But he just listens, and the whole point is that he just hears that her voice, he likes her voice. He hears that she's a good singer, and he's like, yeah, I like me some of that. No shade thrown on Dominic. We stand Dominic, Dominic's great. Okay, so then they meet, and Dominic's like, we should sing together. And then they have a musical number, and they fall in love, sort of, through this musical number, because that's what you do, as one does, fall in love with the king. Let me just take a minute, deep breath, to point out how well done the irony is throughout this story. There's a lot of it, and I don't have time to unpack it all, but there's a great line after they spend the day together where Dominic goes, there's something different about you. You're honest, no pretenses. And he walks away, and she's just like, oh, holy shit, like, I'm lying. This is bad. This is not good. Because obviously throughout this day, she is being herself, but she's being herself in the persona of Annalise. So he's getting to know Erica, but he thinks that that's Annalise. And just the irony of like her being in disguise, and then also the irony of him having been in disguise. Him being in disguise and being comfortable with disguises is going to be more important than you think. So hang on to that too. But there is definitely this through line of people not being what they appear to be. You know what I mean? Okay, so where are we at? Let's see. Right, so Annalise, she still wants to get back to the palace, so she sends her cat with a message tied around its neck to go to the castle, because the cat can understand the go to the castle, Serafina, and deliver the message, and it'll lead them here. But oh no, she's intercepted by Preminger. And at this point, Annalise still doesn't know Preminger is the villain. So, yeah, he shows up, and she's happy to see him. OMG, Preminger! And he's like, yes, this is very convenient. And he takes her and is like, let's go home. But, we don't go home. We're making a side stop to the mines. Why are we at the mines? And then it clicks. You're behind this. You're the villain. Shocker. And he thinks that Annalise has set this up to have a double in her place for whatever reason, instead of going back to the palace. But in any case, Preminger's not going to let that shit slide. He throws her in the mines. Oh yeah, I kind of skipped the part, I knew I would do this, where Julian investigates and finds the cabin in the woods, and then, learns about Preminger's plan. This is at the same time that Preminger learns that Annalise has escaped. And, Julian's smart, but he's not that smart. He makes some noise and gets caught and kidnapped, and he's thrown in the mines. That's where we find him. Annalise is also thrown in the mines. And then what does Preminger do? He starts monologuing. He tells him his whole plan, and he says, I was gonna marry you, but F you, bitch. Now I'm gonna F your mom because you suck. So he literally leaves them to die. He attempts to murder them by causing a cave-in and goes off back to the palace to reveal the imposter. And everybody is so very shocked. And how they prove it is, this is not really a very important plot detail, but Annalise has a birthmark in the shape of a crown on her shoulder, and Erica don't have that. And I guess Julian never seen them princess shoulders, because if he had, he probably would have maybe thought to draw it on or something. I don't know if they thought maybe they'd try to prove it. But in any case, princess shoulder is proof that she is not who she says she is, and she is taken away to the dungeon. And Preminger also says that the princess is dead, that he found her dead in the mines, and that this ring that he stole from her is all that's left, and that Julian and Erica conspired to kill him. This man is a master liar and manipulator. But she gets framed for the murder. Dominic is much confusion and probably thinks a little sus, and the queen's very, very sad. Not only is she about to lose her kingdom, she has now just lost her only daughter. It's terrible. The queen is a good person, good woman, she's just trying to do her best. And what does Preminger do? Takes advantage of this woman's sadness and vulnerability to say, hey, I'm rich now, and your daughter's dead, so she can't marry a rich king, so let's get married. And she agrees. She agrees because she's at the end of her rope. She's got nothing left to lose. And so what is she gonna do? Say no? It's literally quite ironic, because he sings a reprise. Again, I'm getting ahead of myself with the music part. He sings a reprise of How Can I Refuse, but it's How Can You Refuse? And it's quite literal, because how can she refuse? What choice does she have? None. So there we go. Queen's gonna marry a manic little French man, and yeah, everything's not looking too good, apparently. But fear not, because we have Erica, who is not gonna sit idly by while shit goes down, and she breaks out of mother effing prison by singing a lullaby, lulling the guard to sleep, stealing his keys, and making a break for it. Hashtag thug life. But oh no, she's intercepted by a guard. But it's not a guard, it's Dominic in disguise. And then we get a canonical recognition of, you sure love disguises, don't you? And he just gives her this cheeky look like, hope you like roleplay, because baby, I will roleplay. Meanwhile, in the mines, we have Julian and Annalise, and they're like, what are we gonna do? We need to break out of this mine. They're trying, and then they have a little heart-to-heart, and they basically confess their love for each other. It's very sweet. And the geode, she finds a geode, and she's like, ooh, this is pretty. It looks like a rock, but it's got crystals inside of it. And she calls it, she says, you're like this. And he goes, a rock? And she's like, no, unassuming on the outside, but a treasure within. And like the memes for this are hilarious. I'll put one up here because it's just, it gets me every time. But like literally what she means is like, you have no status or rank. You're not anyone important, you know, in society's eyes, but you are valuable to me because of what's within. Or maybe she just straight up called this man ugly. We don't really know. But how sweet, I guess. Julian definitely thinks so. Julian sees no problem with this compliment. He is fully flattered by this. So they hug because Barbie movies don't have people kissing. And then they realize that the mine has like some water and the water starts rising. Wolfie like finds a old mine shaft and digs it down, and they escape by like water rising and you know, it doesn't matter. They escape the mine shaft. Bada bing, bada boom, Bob's your uncle, and it's time to crash a wedding, baby. We're at the altar. We've got Preminger looking real pleased with himself. We've got the queen looking really depressed, poor woman. And then, stop the wedding, mother! Princess, alive. Pauper, not in prison. Preminger, not getting any queen booty. Preminger, foiled. He makes a break for it, but he's stopped by 2 girls and a horse because #feminism. You know, I've actually heard these movies called feminist, and if by feminist you mean female protagonists doing things and having agency, not at the expense of the male characters, then I would say yeah, because the female characters in this movie do have agency and do things, and actually, and much of what they do glorifies femininity, which is a thing that's kind of a lost art in today's media, and it is not at the expense of the male characters. I would say our male leads are perfectly capable because they are helpful, like the men are very integral to the plot, you know, like whether it's emotionally or physically. Julian is literally trying to solve the mystery. Dominic is trying to do the best he can to like woo this princess that he doesn't know. We've got good male leads, but we are obviously focused on the female protagonist, sure. So then with the villain foiled and carried away, the denouement begins. Annalise gets honest with her mother, says, hey, I'm in love with Julian. I want to marry him. And mom stands, but she's like, well, I would totally let you marry the man you love, but what about our people not starving? And Annalise, she's got a solution, because while they were in the mines, she discovered that there's a shit ton of geodes down there that they had been overlooking because they looked like regular rocks. Move over, gold standard. It's time for amethyst standard. And so she builds a new industry out of these geodes, and it's never really established what this new industry is, but I would like to think that they just like replace their currency with amethysts. Like instead of trading with gold coins, they just trade with the little like amethyst pillars that you see at rock shops, but that's probably not it. It doesn't matter, but all you know is that she was able to save the kingdom by thinking outside the box, you know, thinking outside the system, and the economy is saved by youthful ingenuity and innovation. Go STEM! But seriously, it's kind of a creative solution to the whole problem, and it lets her get the best of both worlds. Meanwhile, Erica gets her debt paid off by Annalise, so she's free to travel the world, and she does, even though she has the love of a literal king, and she is smitten by a literal king. That ain't gonna stop her from pursuing her career, so she leaves him. She refuses the initial proposal of marriage from a literal king. She does take the ring though. Let's just see what happens. Let's see where this goes. And he says, I'll take my chances, meaning I'll wait for you. Isn't that just so sweet? He's a literal king. He could have whoever he wants, and he chooses this Pauper girl because they sang a duet together and like vibed, you know? So she goes off and she becomes a performer, a stage performer, and sings and tours the world. She lives her dream. But home is where the hot king is. I mean, home is where the heart is. So she returns to her kingdom, or I guess she goes to Dominic's kingdom first, which you can assume is the next kingdom over, I suppose, and is like, I'm back, the world was great, let's get married. And then it's time for double wedding scene. double wedding scene. I don't know a single little girl doesn't enjoy a good double wedding scene because you can self-insert you and your best friend, your sister. See, I grew up watching this with my sister who's 2 years younger than me, so we always inserted ourselves. She was always Annalise for some reason and I was Erica, even though we're both brunettes. Maybe because she liked pink more and she liked the Serafina as the cat more. So anyways, I don't mind. I'll be Erica. Like, I'm a little rough around the edges, I guess. Plus, Dominic, yes, absolutely. Dominic all the way. Oh my god. And that's the movie. That's the end. The end. The end. We zoom out. Everybody's married. This is a romantic comedy, I guess, so it ends in marriage. And we're good. Oh, and even Wolfie and Serafina get married and they say outright that they had a lot of freaking kittens, and you can read into the subtext of that all you freaking want. But then the movie ends and it's beautiful. And honestly, it's just so much fun. It's just a fun movie. It just has surprisingly competent writing for, like, most of the decisions make sense and the characters are actually pretty smart for, like, Barbie characters. Like, they always make Barbie pretty capable, but, like, you have two Barbies here. So you have, like, they did actually a decent job making them very distinct personalities. When they're put in different situations, they act differently. And even though they're both, like, very moral and very, like, good-hearted, Annalise is a little bit more, like, subdued, and Erica is a little bit more, like, outspoken. It's a well done. And then you got, like, Julian. He's very, like, introspective, and he's, like, sharp and intuitive, and he notices things. You have Dominic. He's very, like, he has, like, this conscience, and he's moral, and he wants to do the right thing. He doesn't want everything to be, like, all on ceremony and whatnot. So, like, and then you got Preminger, who's just, you know, a sociopath, and we love it. You know, we love to hate him. So these characters are just a lot of fun. When you watch the movie, you can, like, really actually enjoy them and enjoy the story. But what you can enjoy most, honestly, is the music. The music makes this movie, as it should with a musical.
Hey guys, Editing Becca here. So this video ended up so long that I decided to split it into 2 parts. Yeah, apparently I have that much to say about Barbie as the princess and the pauper. So tune in next week because that's when we actually are going to deep dive a little bit into the music and then the themes of this cinematic masterpiece. If you've hung in this long, thank you so much. I cannot believe you watched the whole thing. Your patience will be greatly rewarded. Until next time, keep it weird and enjoy this cover of How Can I Refuse set to the beat of Humble by Kendrick Lamar. It's freaking awesome. Go listen to it.
Yeah. I've been scraping, I've been lying like a rug, and for 10 long years I've had to pay my dues. But today I'm escaping, for the last gold has been dug. It was waiting there, so how could I refuse?